Dear learners, today I am with you to discuss a topic from International Relations, Book 1. This is the post-Cold War issues. Let us first see what is Cold War. Then we'll discuss about the issues of post-Cold War. Now, Cold War, as you know, that was an indirect war between two superpowers, USA and USSR, and it was started just after the Second World War, that is during the period of 1945 and afterwards, and it continued till the disintegration of USSR. And during that period, the whole world was divided into two blocks, the US bloc and the USSR bloc, the capitalist bloc and the communist bloc. And these two superpowers used to help or used to assist their supporters regarding the financial assistance or all-round developments. And we find that throughout the period there was tension between and among the nations. Though the two superpowers did not fight with each other in any battlefield, but there were a lot of wars during that period, like the Korean War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Afghanistan crisis, the Vietnam crisis, and a lot. At the same time, the process was there. The initiatives were also made by the these countries of the world to conclude a number of peace treaties, number of disarmament treaties, so that the two superpowers reduce their arms and weapons. So we find there is the SALT 1, SALT 2, START 1, NPT, etc., etc., etc. Then ultimately there was the disintegration of USSR in 1990, and this disintegration of USSR separated almost all the republics, the 15 republics separated from each other, and they formed the Commonwealth of Independent States. And we find there is a new development started in the world scenario, in the international scenario. As you know that international politics is dynamic in nature, and in every stages in history, from the history, we come to know that there are a number of events which changed the scenario of the whole world. For example, the dropping of atom bomb in Hiroshima or Nagasaki. For example, there was the disintegration of USSR, the Iraqi invasion of the 9/11 or the 9/11 incident. All these are the important events that change the international scenario. In the same way, the one such notable development was the end of Cold War in 1990 and the beginning of new era affecting nearly every aspect of international relations. Now, what are these aspects? So that we'll discuss as a form of features of the post-Cold War world. The first feature of the post-Cold War world is the unipolarity. As you have seen that in the Cold War scenario, there was a bipolarity. The world was divided into two blocks. There are two superpowers, along with some other these small states. But the end of Cold War, this changed the international scenario into a unipolarity. That means only one country became the superpower and started to dominate the whole international scenario. Then we find that there is this reduced demand of the non-aligned movement also in the post-Cold War era, whereas during the Cold War scenario, the non-aligned groups, including India, Cuba, or Indonesia, they established their hold But post-Cold War era, these non-aligned groups also, they were little bit of, we find that there is a little bit of this decreasing of their power, diminishing their power. As a result, we find the world or the United States becomes the powerhouse without any parallel or competitor. Because in the Cold War scenario, USSR was the best competitor. But after the Cold War, because USSR became disintegrated and Russia became a very small state, and Russia had no power to compete with USA. As a result, we find that there is the unipolarity in the international scenario. Then the second feature, the challenges to nation states. Let us first see what is nation state. Since the Westphalian Treaty in 1648, there is the emergence of the national state system in the world scenario. There is a change in this national state system. But because of the end of Cold War, there is the globalization started, and this globalization, due to this globalization, the nation state system, they face remarkable challenges, because we find that there is the ethnic conflict started, there was civil war started between the different communities or among different communities within the state itself. Then many states become multinational states in composition and character. You can take the example of Yugoslavia. You can take the example of Czechoslovakia. All the states, or you can take the example of USSR itself. So USSR itself, because of the disintegration, we find that there is a Commonwealth of Independent States. They formed the CIS, and they all became independent sovereign states, but they became a Commonwealth of the states. Then we find the disintegration of a number of states, not only USSR. Yugoslavia was disintegrated, Czechoslovakia was disintegrated. We find there is this conflict between Bosnia-Herzegovina. Then demand for the right to self-determination. This is one of the important features of this post-Cold War era. In most of the parts of the world, the ethnic communities, the small communities, they started to raise their demands for the self-determination. They wanted to be separated. So you can see that in case of this United Kingdom, Ireland got separated from United Kingdom, and this got this right on the basis of the right to self-determination. You can find that in case of our country, a number of ethnic communities started to raise their demand for the self-determination. In case of Sri Lanka, you can know that there is a dispute between ethnic conflict between Tamils and the Sinhalese, and the Tamils, they're demanding for this right to self-determination. So we find that there is a civil war against their own governments. You can find that there is the conflict or there is a crisis in Afghanistan, Angola, Central African Republic, former Yugoslavia, Georgia, Haiti, Somalia. A lot of examples are there. Then regarding the nation states, we find that there is the impact of globalization also brought some kinds of challenges to nation states. Most of the states, they started to lose their this political ideology, and they started to follow this liberalization policy of the Western liberal democratic system. In case of India also, we find the same thing. From 90s decade, the government of India adopted this new economic policy, and on the basis of new economic policy, this liberalization and privatization policy was introduced. As a result, a number of government enterprises, number of this public sector companies, transfer to the private sector. Can give the example of our BSNL, which was at one time, which is the important government department like TNT, and it was transferred into the BSNL because of this global impact of the globalization. And this is a kind of challenge to our economic sovereignty, to our political sovereignty, and it happened in almost every parts of the world. Then the third feature, that is the changing dimensions of security. So the states they started to face a kind of security threat also. There is a threat from the border states. In most of the cases, the border, and this is again because of the globalization. Globalization has made borderless and boundaryless boundaryless state, or you can say that borderless state. So all the states and the whole world becomes into a small village because of globalizations. As a result, you find that there is the threats from border, since there is no demarcation. As a result, there is threat from the border. We find that there is every time there is the this border fight or conflict between India, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, or this you can find that there is conflict between Iran and Iraq. There is conflict between Israel, Palestine. Yeah, there is conflict between Iraq and Kuwait. So these all are the bordering states, but in between this their border, they face the war, they face the conflict, military threat. Then the civil war, it also a kind of military threats for this for the existence of the states, existence of the sovereignty of the states. Civil wars means the ethnic conflict between and among the different minority communities within the state itself. As a result, there is the internal disorder. There is the degradation of the law and order situation within the country, and the government face a number of challenges, number of threat from the internal side as well as from the external side also, which has changed the security dimension. Then the non-military threats. Besides the military threats, we find that there is a non-military threats. There is the economic instability. The 90s decade was in throughout the world. We find there is the economic recession. So as a result, there is economic this instability due to adoption a new kind of policy, new kind of liberalization and privatization policies by most of the countries of the world. So there is no stability in the economic scenario. Then the climate change, one of the important issue here, that is the environmental degradation. And because some of the states belonging to Asia and Africa, we find that due to the adoption of this globalization policy, the new industries come up, and from these industries, because of the pollution of these industries, because of the waste materials come out from these industries, the environment becomes polluted, and which is a threat for the climate of the countries. So there is a climate change problem. Then the global warming, one of the important issue during this period, during the post-Cold War era, that most of the countries face, that is a global warming. You can find, you can see, you can you might have heard from your grandparents or parents that at one time, if you take the example of our state, if you take the example of our country, that at one time we had a very pleasant weather here, but nowadays we find that there is too much of hot, or we find that there is no such rain. In the rainy areas also there is no such rain. Or if you take the example of Rajasthan, Rajasthan is a desert area, but nowadays we find that there is floods. Many times there is flood in Rajasthan also. As a result, we just these all because of this global warming, because of the climate change, because of the environmental degradation, because of the deforestation, and which are the impact of globalization in case of our state, and in case of all over the world we find these things. Then the next is the initiatives for peace and development. Now, as we said that the post-Cold War era, we face a lot of changes. There is this security threat. There is a threat for sovereignty of the nation states. There is environmental degradation. As a result, it is definitely the international organization, that is IGNOU, must take some initiative so that all these problems can be solved. Now, let us see first that efforts for peace that United Nations initiatives. So what are the United Nations did during the period, that is the 90s and 2000 decades? That there is an agenda for peace was prepared by the United Nations Secretary General Boutros Ghali in 1992. And this agenda for peace actually declared that what are the peace initiatives should be adopted by the countries, by the member states, so that the world should not face any kind of war. There should be establishment of peace. Not only that, the United Nations also adopted certain these proposals for the developmental process. And now this we can take the example of Rio Summit of 1992, that is regarding the environmental degradation, that is the Earth Summit, or the Vienna Summit on Human Rights in 1993. And this Vienna Summit adopted or compelled the countries, the member states, to establish the this Human Rights Commission, so that the violation of human rights, the cases of violation of human rights can be handled. As a result, in case of our country also, the National Human Rights Commission was established during that period, and this National Human Rights Commission used to handle all the human rights violation cases. And why it was done by the United Nations? Since there was the violation of human rights throughout the world, the result of which the United Nations instructed the member states to do something, so that the people throughout the world, people of the nation, they can enjoy their rights in the true sense of the term. And the next one is the Beijing Conference on Women in 1995. So there is the violation of women rights throughout the world. So as a result, there was the CEDAW was signed in 1979. But even though the CEDAW was signed by the member states, but most of the states did not adopt any kind of initiative, did not do any kind of initiative for the this promotion and development of women's rights. So the Beijing Conference on Women in 1995, instructed all the members of this women conference, so that the development of women can be started, or the countries can initiate a number of developmental programs, developmental schemes for the women's development. So we find in case of India also, that Domestic Violence Act was passed in 2005, or some other activities started by the government of India, so that the condition of women can be developed in our country, and it was in throughout the world, you can see. Then the restructuring of United Nations, and this is actually the demand raised by different parts of the world, since United Nations is a world organization. So the countries, most of the member states, they demanded that when UNO was established, during that time there are only 51 members, and because of these 51 members, in case of Security Council, the most important organ of United Nations, there are 15 there are the 5 permanent members and 6 non-permanent members, but in the 70s decade the number was increased. There were the 10 non-permanent members and 5 permanent members. So the most of the member states basically below like India, like Japan, like Brazil, like South Africa, they demanded that there should be the increase of the number of permanent members. And some of the these states who are doing the notable work for the establishment of peace in the world should be given the permanent membership in the Security Council. So this demand was raised. Not only that, the member states demanded that the functions of the United States also should be changed. So to some extent, we find that because of this demand, the Security Councils or the United Nations Security Council's meetings nowadays, it was not so closed door meetings. Nowadays the member states, other members as well as the non-member states also come to know about the agenda of the meetings, and they can they submit their decisions through writings. As a result, little bit of changes you can find because of the demands raised by different parts of the world regarding the restructuring of the United Nations as well as the developmental bodies. So what is the conclusion? What is the summary of this post-Cold War era features? So these features indicates that there is a number of changes after the Cold War throughout the world. First one is the unipolarity. Then second one was this challenges to the nation state system. Then there is the this threats or the dimensions of the security dimensions, changes in the security dimensions. Then there's the growing demands regarding the restructuring of the United Nations. So all these things this compel the world leaders to think that uh, to, uh, to do more and more activities so that the world can be saved from any kinds of danger or any kinds of this international this threat. For example, this international terrorism, which was one of the important this feature of this post-Cold War era. We can cite the example of 9/11 incident of this 2001, when this terrorist attacked the Al Qaeda, attacked this Pentagon and the World Trade Center. So this was one of the important event in the post-Cold War era, which again saved the world this scenario, because after this 9/11 incident, the world leaders started to think, the world powers started to think that how to combat international terrorism with joint effort, with combined effort. At the same time, because of this environmental degradation, the world powers started to think that to adopt certain common effort so that environment can be saved from to being polluted. The result of which you can find that a number of these initiatives, a number of this program of actions adopted by different countries of the world, and to save the environment, to save the human life. So these features compel us to think about to do or to take some initiative so that world can be saved from the danger of war. At the same time, nowadays the world powers started to think that to create to create alternative so that the superpower or the domination of USA can be reduced. The result of which we can hope that the non-aligned countries, which was started its movement during the Cold War scenario, so these non-aligned countries, if they become united once again, they can be an alternative or they can be a competitor against this US superpower or US hegemonism. Thus, with this, I summarize my lecture on this post-Cold War era. Hope you can follow me and hope you can understand the scenario of the post-Cold War era of international world. Thank you.